My final thoughts before the Bills face the Jets, an injury update with Dr. Kyle Trimble, and my 5 predictions for Monday night are all coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, folks, this is the last conversation that we're going to have before the Buffalo Bills start their season on Monday Night Football against the Jets. And so I want to leave you with some final thoughts. We'll talk to Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills about the injury situation. Some really good insight there on Von Miller, Connor McGovern, Justin Shorter, Valen Spector, of course, what's going on with the Jets and Micah Hyde. And then I have 5 predictions for Monday night to share with you in our final segment. But I want to start with some final thoughts. And within the final thoughts, I have 3 different things that I want to get into. The first is this belief that I have that the pressure for this game, this week 1 Monday Night Football game, it's all on the Jets. It's Aaron Rodgers' Jets debut, Monday Night Football, national audience, their place on 9/11. They're starting to get vocal, right? Not necessarily against the Bills, but a lot of confidence in who they are as a football team, and you're seeing more and more of those quotes come out. They were obviously on Hard Knocks. They're the darlings of the NFL right now. And they're a team that needs for this to work. They've not had success in terms of winning with consistency in a long time. The Jets have had 7 consecutive losing seasons. They finished last in the AFC East in the last 3 seasons and 6 of the last 7 seasons. They've had 1 winning record in the last 12 years. They have a lot riding on this Aaron Rodgers experiment. And their schedule's pretty tough. They start with the Bills. That's a tough game. Then they go to Dallas. Then they host the Patriots. Then they host the Chiefs, go to Denver, and then host the Philadelphia Eagles. That's their first 6 games before the bye. They come out of the bye and face the Giants and the Chargers. Then they have the Raiders, the Bills again, and the Dolphins. That's their first 11 games, 8 of them against playoff teams from last year, including the Bills, Cowboys, Chiefs, Eagles, Chargers, Giants, Bills again, and Dolphins. The pressure's on them. This is business as usual for the Buffalo Bills. They've been on big stages like crazy over the last 3 years. The pressure's on the Jets. People expect the Bills to be a good team. I know there's some debate about how good they will be, but I think most people think the Bills are going to be a good team, should be in the playoffs, good chance to win the division. But I think the pressure in this football game is on the Jets, to which I say good. Put them in that vantage point, having to play football games as a team that hasn't had any success in a long time, to go out there and have to face a good Bills team at their place. Are they capable of winning the game? Of course they are. They beat the Bills last year with Zach Wilson as their quarterback. But the pressure's on the Jets in this football game. The next thing I want to get into is just some general thoughts on NFL seasons in general. Now, I'll never tell you how to fan, right? You fan how you want to fan. And I certainly understand that football is a very emotional game for some people. But every season is a marathon and not a sprint. Things are never as good as you think they are. They're never as bad as you think they are. And so you can choose to ride the ups and downs, the highs and lows of a season if you want, but I would encourage you to not ride the roller coaster and just take things in stride this year. The Bills started the 2021 season with that loss against the Steelers. The team was completely flat. By the end of that season, most people thought the Bills were going to win the Super Bowl until 13 seconds happened. I'm going to be here for you 6 episodes per week at least throughout the season, and I hope you'll join me for the journey. We'll learn who this team is along the way, and I'm very excited to talk about it with you on this podcast. But again, as this season is about to kick off, I would encourage you to let things play out, take it in stride, and stay off the roller coaster. The last thing I want to say in this opening segment as I close out my final thoughts is not really about the Bills and Jets. It's about the Bills and the age of their roster. You know, a lot has been said about the age of the Bills roster and in particular an aging nucleus. And I think there's some truth to that. And perhaps it's a concern, but it's only a concern if Brandon Beane can't replenish the roster with youth. And I think there's been some really good strides that have been made in that department. Now, I'll get into that in a moment. But first, let's talk about the Bills roster age. The Bills roster's average age is 26.85 years old. That's the 4th oldest in the NFL. The oldest roster in the NFL is the Jets, 27.28. The youngest roster in the NFL is the Packers at 25.36. Funny how the team that got rid of the oldest quarterback in the NFL now has the youngest roster, and the team that acquired the oldest quarterback in the league, now has the oldest roster. Funny how that goes. But the point is, and I've said this before on the podcast, the range in the oldest roster in the NFL and the youngest roster is very small. It's less than 2 years, 1.92 years. That's it. So I'm not sure how useful average roster age is as something we should actually care about. Now back to the strides I referenced. You're seeing some young players have roles on this football team, and I know that was a big talking point last year. The Bills didn't get much from their rookie class. Meanwhile, the Chiefs had like 1 billion rookies on defense, and they won the Super Bowl. And so there's this big conversation about the Bills and playing young people, right? They're going to have 2 rookie starters this year. O'Cyrus Torrence and Dalton Kincaid. O'Cyrus Torrence is going to be on the field for 100% of the snaps this year. And we're expecting Dalton Kincaid to have a meaningful role in this offense. And that's already from this draft class. You've got 3 starters now from the 2022 draft class. The guys that didn't help as rookies, they're starting now. James Cook, Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford. Those are starters. You got 2 starters from the 2021 draft class in Greg Rousseau and Spencer Brown, not to mention DeMar Hamlin. You've also got some other guys on rookie deals like a Gabe Davis. So you're seeing young players get more and more opportunity with this football team. I think last year was just a different type of season. I think the Bills have shown a willingness to play rookies and young players throughout the years. Last year was definitely not one of those occasions. But how quickly did it take? It took 1 year for them to have 3 starters from that draft class. But on top of seeing these guys earn roles and get big roles on this football team, I love seeing that there's 3 guys who were on the practice squad all of last season now make the opening day roster. Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandermark, Kingsley Jonathan. Those were practice squad players last year that made the initial 53-man roster this year. And we've seen that happen a couple of times in recent history with Quentin Morris and Cam Lewis, guys that were on the practice squad that have become staples on the 53-man roster. And through that, you're seeing young players bump some of the older guys off the roster. Alec Anderson making this football team bumps and Ike Bucker off the roster. He's not even on the practice squad. The young mix of players at linebacker with Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard, they bump out an A.J. Klein. Damar Hamlin and Cam Lewis, they bump off of Dean Marlowe. Ryan Vandemark pushes David Quessenberry off the roster. So young players bumping off, developing and bumping off aging players that have basically expired in terms of their usefulness as NFL players. And so all of that's encouraging. Oh, by the way, the Bills have 9 picks right now in the 2024 NFL draft. And so I find all of this to be very encouraging when it comes to player development and infusing youth onto this roster. I think that's something that needed to happen. I like where it's going. Obviously, those are good steps. We're concerned about the star power of the roster, right? I get that. But I think these are really good steps, and the Bills have the ammunition to continue making these types of steps. All right, just a moment. We're going to talk to Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills. But first, I need to tell you about LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And folks, it is so easy to create a job post over at LinkedIn Jobs. And then once you do, you add your job with the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. And then simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Bills Mafia, let's get personal for a minute. Has anyone ever been caught skinny dipping? You know what I mean. When you dip your tortilla chip just barely enough to get a dab of salsa on it. It's okay. We've all been there. And sometimes it's not your fault. Most tortilla chips can't even handle a chunky dip without breaking right in half. But those days are over. It's time to say goodbye to skinny dipping and hello to chunky dunking, because Zach's Mighty Tortilla Chips are literally made to dip. They're strong and sturdy enough to handle the heftiest dips of guac, all 7 layers of dip, and every last chunk in that salsa. So say goodbye to skinny dipping and hello to chunky dunking with Zach's Mighty Tortilla Chips, available at Wegmans in the chip aisle. Zach's Mighty Tortilla Chips, equipped to dip. I'm joined now by Kyle Trimble. He's a doctor of physical therapy. He runs bangedupbills.com. You can follow him on Twitter at bangedupbills. He joins us each week to get us ready from an injury perspective for the upcoming Bills game. And Kyle, we've got a nice light injury report to start off the season. We know that's probably going to change real quick. But for now, the only player of consequence on the Bills injury report is Micah Hyde. And Sean McDermott, kind of a weird sequence of events, said he wouldn't practice due to a back injury and some other stuff. And then he practiced. And then the next day, Sean McDermott says, well, yeah, I know I said he wouldn't practice, but then he did. He did some light stuff, and then he practiced in full. What's going on with Micah Hyde?
According to the team, a back injury and nothing more. So it's really interesting how Sean McDermott said that. We saw a video of him out on Wednesday getting some work done by head athletic trainer Nate Bresky. He's working on his lumbar area, SI joint area, just doing some different general mobilizations. But he was moving around pretty well, throwing the ball at Josh Allen, running around, but did not practice fully in team drills at some point on Thursday's practice. And then during the walkthrough on Friday, he's able to practice in full. So we don't know exactly what the nature of the back injury was. He thought that it's something along the lines of getting older, maybe playing with his kids. But it's interesting that Sean McDermott said that he's doing some other things. Mm-hmm. So the back might be the more acute pressing issue, but he might be doing some other things that might crop up throughout the season. So it's just something to watch. But considering you have Micah Hyde ready for week 1 against the Jets, especially considering Rodgers' former teammate, that's going to be really beneficial. So something to watch, but hopefully he doesn't have any setbacks during the game on Monday night.
He said he was going to play, right?
Yes,
I mean, he was pretty emphatic, like, I'm going to play next question. So I assume he will. One thing that's interesting to me about this entire situation is something that I've learned over the offseason. Let me share a little of my knowledge with you here. I had a little lower back injury myself back in June. Was doing some deadlifts, got the bar out in front of me too far and hurt my lower back. But what I learned through rehabbing that injury is that you want to work on that area, but it's also about the neighbors, right? The neighboring parts of what your injury is. So we focused a lot on those neighboring areas of my lower back, and that got me back in action quicker. I'm wondering if some of that's going on with Micah Hyde, just based on what they were working on, the fact that they said there was some other things, that's going into this entire equation.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm sure that they're working on some hamstring stuff. I'm sure they're working up on more thoracic stuff, working on core stability. When I'm always working on an injury, you want to work on the acute area right now, but you still have to work around the other areas because everything supports everything else there. And look at the arm and the leg is like a chain. So if you have a weak link in the chain, it's going to affect how the other parts move there. So while you do want to give rehab and support to that affected area, you still want to make sure the other areas are good so those don't break down and then you have bigger problems down the line.
There you go. I'm learning, Dr. Kyle Trimble. I want to talk about Connor McGovern. He's not on the injury report, but he had a little something with his knee, and the team kind of made light of it. And then we've seen some practice video. The guy doesn't look like he's moving all that well. Again, not on the report. I think every expectation is he's going to play on Monday night. But, I mean, come on, Quinnen Williams across from him. I don't think he's 100%. What are you picking up from seeing those videos?
He definitely injured his knee. So for Brandon Beane to say nothing major, I mean, it might not be a major injury, but it's still not nothing. So just to quickly recap, he injured his knee the Wednesday before the final preseason game, missed that whole week of practice. And then we saw him the next week where after cut downs, and he looked like he was running through sand, mud. It just didn't look pretty. Trouble slowing down, trouble pivoting off the right knee, had a big bulky brace on there. It just didn't look great. And we were texting back and forth about that. Fortunately, we saw the next week, this past Wednesday, there was some more video of him and he looked to be a little more fluid, still not 100%, still laboring on it. But the hope is maybe that the knee injury isn't going to be lingering super long, that even a 78% Connor McGovern is maybe still better than 100% David Edwards, who he might be dealing with something himself, but they probably look as, let's get the guy out there that with that continuity of the offensive line, even at less than 100%, will be better than plugging somebody in there. And then maybe that's where you have issues where Quinnen Williams does take advantage of that juicy matchup there. So that's something to watch, but I don't expect the Connor McGovern injury to linger, but it's something still worth watching if Quinnen Williams does get through the line on Monday night.
Couple of players went to injured reserve right at the cut down. Justin Shorter, rookie wide receiver, and the Bale Inspector, the second-year linebacker. So I want to get your thoughts on these two guys. Are these more procedural type stuff where these are just minor issues, want to keep them kind of stashed for a little bit to keep other guys on the roster, or are there some long-term concerns with either Spector or Shorter?
So we'll hit Spector first. So Spector was the more notable injury. He suffered in the final preseason game. He was trying to pull up to avoid hitting, I can't remember who it was, out of bounds, which I would have drew a penalty. So he just stumbled, and then you could see him kind of get overextended and then suffer the right hamstring strain. And he was having trouble walking, grabbing at the back of his leg. That made me think that it was at least grade 2, even a minor grade 2, where there's an actual injury, and knowing that how the linebacker depth was and just the opportunity to move somebody to IR to stash them, there is a real injury, but I think that gave him the opportunity to move somebody over, bring a vested veteran back, and then allow him to rehab fully instead of trying to work through that, because he is a key special teamer. So you want to make sure that he can sprint down the field and not have any setbacks, and then he's sitting on IR for even longer. So as for Justin Shorter, though, he has a hamstring injury. He did deal with a hamstring injury during his last year of Florida, which he missed 3 games with. He does have a more of a checkered injury history. I don't know how severe the hamstring injury is, though. He played in 35 plays. I couldn't find anything in the video or the film where he would have suffered a hamstring strain. That might have been more of a stash thing, but I do not believe the Bills are making up injuries. I believe he has an injury, but they're allowing him to go over to injury reserve, get fully healthy, learn the system some more, and then that way they can bring him back when he's ready versus, trying to push through another injury.
Tell you what, the Justin Shorter that I watched in 2 of the 3 preseason games wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to play. Not health aside, like just from route running and even special teams, where you feel like he can be an asset on those 4th downs and special teams. I felt like he needed some work, and so I could see him kind of being more of a stash type player. And certainly they got 4 guys on the practice squad at wide receiver, one of them being Andy Isabella. You feel nice about Shorter just sticking on IR. We have this pool of guys to lean on if we need to. But right now, can you really rely on Justin Shorter? Probably not, but you also don't necessarily want to expose him to waivers. So I think that was definitely procedural. I want to ask you about Von Miller. Here we are, right? I think kind of both of our expectations, what happened here. I know there was some week one hype. I always thought that was kind of crazy. He's on the PUP list. He'll be out at least 4 games. But I think something that maybe provoked some thoughts in people this week was Von Miller. I think it was during his regular press conference. He said that, hey, Dr. Cooper cleared me. And people are like, well, what do you mean? You're cleared. Why aren't you playing? Maybe you can guide us along here, how to interpret that and what the road ahead is for Von Miller to get back on the field.
So it is interesting, and that would promote or provoke a lot of discussion why somebody's clear, but then they can't play. So usually we see that there's a decrease in re-tear rates after 9 months, and traditionally guys follow that, most surgeons there. I know Dr. Cooper specifically has had a history of releasing some guys sooner than that 9-week period, or very, very close to like 34, 38 weeks in that range. So, but those guys are also a lot younger that he's released, and there have been more offensive based players from my recollection. So the fact that he's released to perform football activities 2 days before PUP, that didn't give him the chance to really get his body hardened and get prepared for football. And that was the same or very similar wording Brandon Beane used last year when they're talking about Tre'Davious White. So they decided to stash Tre'Davious White last year, knowing that he needed to get his body hardened and ready for the season. And Von Miller, even though he's a Hall of Fame guy, he's been through this before, he's had a lot of seasons on him, he still needs to get his body ready to prepare to play football at a high level. So to rush him back out there and not really get any hits, that's a smart choice to say, hey, let's get you ramped up through that way, get more pads on, get simulated hits, pressures, whatever you need to do, rather than just jumping out there and then you're still not adjusted to whether he wears a brace or not or anything else that is going on. So it's good that he's cleared, but he still needs that ramp up period, just like every guy does in training camp.
All right. Appreciate that insight. I want to ask you about the Jets. Is there anything on the Jets side of things that we need to know? I know that some tackles have some stuff, a couple running backs. What's the Jet stuff that we need to be mindful of?
Most of their stuff is more, I don't want to say chronic, but there's nothing acute here. So looking at the injury report, they have 3 guys on there. They have Mekhi Becton, who is still working back from his right knee injury. It's cost him better part of 2 years. He's also working through an illness, so his status is questionable right now until they give an update. But they just want to make sure they manage his reps so he doesn't flare up the knee. Same goes for offensive tackle Duane Brown. He's coming back from his left rotator cuff repair. He got activated a few weeks ago, and once again, he's ramping up, just like we talked about with Von Miller and everybody else. Finally, Breece Hall, he's working back from his ACL tear that cost him most of his rookie season. He's looked great in practices, but he still needs that ramp-up time, just like everybody else. And they're smart not to get him out there too quickly just because they have Dalvin Cook, and they have a really nice, stable running back. So get the guy some reps, some time, but don't need to be the bell cow and cause setbacks with that knee, and then you're missing him for even longer stretches.
Dr. Kyle Trimble. I love talking to you, man. This dude studies the NFL. He studies injuries. He studies the Twitter clips, the Instagrams, so he can bring us this information every single week. Appreciate what you do, and thank you for sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Joe. Go Bills.
Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, check this out. This is a great offer. All customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You got to check out these deals. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use. You can bet on everything from the spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, folks, welcome back. I want to give you my 5 predictions for Monday Night Football. But first, I would like to invite you to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. This has been awesome. We've been doing it for a few months now. I've really enjoyed it. My favorite part is the one-on-one text conversations. You can send me your questions, comments, whatever you have about the Bills, and I'm just a text message away. Direct line right to me. Love going back and forth and talking Bills football with you guys, but also I've been doing this throughout the preseason, and I plan on doing it throughout the regular season, but sending out in-game thoughts as I'm watching the Bills games live. I'm sending out live text to everybody to let you know just kind of the things that I'm watching, things I'm observing, that type of stuff. So check that out. People loved it in the preseason. I'm going to continue it through the regular season. So don't miss your opportunity to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. I also, give my first thoughts on all major Bills news. I sent out mass text messages. We have herd mentality priority for the subtext community. Lots of cool stuff. So check it out. If you'd like to join, there's a link in the show notes for today. So just if you're on YouTube or whatever podcasting platform, click on the show notes. There's a link to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. Would love for you to join. Check it out. Everybody gets 2 weeks free, and I hope you will consider. All right, it's prediction time. Every week I give you 5 predictions for things that I think will happen for the Bills game. And through this, I try to tell a story, right? I try to predict things that will fall in line with what I think the game script is going to look like. And so here you are. My first prediction, since it's week 1 and the Bills are healthy going into this game, we're expecting all 53 players on the active roster to be available. And so with that in mind, I wanted to predict the inactive players, right? If you're a team that dresses 8 offensive linemen, that means that you have to have 5 inactive players. And so I think the Bills will have 5 inactive players on Monday night. I think 4 of them are very easy for me to predict. And then the 5th one's where it gets interesting. I think Alec Anderson, he'll be inactive. I think Germain Ifedi, he'll be inactive. So 2 offensive linemen. You have your 5 starters, and that still leaves you with Ryan Bates, David Edwards, and Ryan Vandemark as your 3 backups. So Anderson and Ifedi are 2 of them. I think Kingsley Jonathan will be inactive. That'll still leave the Bills with 4 defensive ends and Rousseau, Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, and Shaq Lawson. And then I think Kaiir Elam is going to be inactive. He's not a starter. I don't think he's the primary backup to Christian Benford. I think Dane Jackson is. And so I think Kaiir Elam will be inactive for this football game. And so who's the 5th guy? This is where it gets interesting. I think there's 3 options that make some level of sense to me. One of them being Latavius Murray. I don't think it's going to be Latavius Murray because I think the Bills are going to want to have Damian Harris and Latavius Murray available behind James Cook. I just do. But he's a possibility. I think Khalil Shakir is a possibility. They only have 5 receivers, but they have, I just feel like Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy are above Khalil Shakir right now in the depth chart. I think he's a possibility, but I'm not going to predict him. The player I'm going to predict is Poona Ford. And I just feel with there being 4 other defensive tackles in Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, I feel like do you need 5 defensive tackles to be active, especially when on your defensive ends, Shaq Lawson, Greg Rousseau, and AJ Epinesa can reduce inside and rush. And so I just feel like 5 defensive tackles, one of them makes sense. And I guess it's Poona Ford just kind of based on, the Bills have released their unofficial depth charts and Poona Ford's like the 5th guy. And so that's why I'm going to predict him. But I could talk myself into Khalil Shakir for sure. I could talk myself into one of the safeties as well, whether it's Cam Lewis or Damar Hamlin. But I don't know. I feel like those guys are very useful for special teams where Poona Ford's not going to help you on special teams. So that's kind of where I go. So my predicted 5 inactives, Alec Anderson, Germain Ifedi, Kaiir Elam, Kingsley Jonathan, and Poona Ford. My second prediction is that the first touchdown of the season for the Buffalo Bills, that will be scored on Monday Night Football, and the player scoring it, his name is Stefon Diggs. I think Stefon Diggs is going to have a huge year. I've obviously predicted him to break the touchdown record, but this was prompted. I was playing golf with my brother David on Friday, and he said, well, who do you think's going to score the first touchdown? And I'm like, oh, I love this question. And then I thought about it, and I was like, I think it's going to be Stefon Diggs. And it might be the first drive. It might first or second drive. 9 plays, 70 yards, something like that. And I have visions of Stefon Diggs from about the 5-yard line in a goal to go situation, and him just stemming hard to his left, breaking right, crossing the face of Sauce Gardner and catching a touchdown right there on like a quick speed out. So put me down for Stefon Diggs scoring the first touchdown of the season on the touchdown pass from Josh Allen. Number 3, I'm predicting that James Cook leads all backs in this game in yards from scrimmage. So obviously more than any other player on the Bills, but also on the Jets. And they got Breece Hall, who's an explosive young player, Dalvin Cook, paying a pretty good amount of money to come over there and be one of the running backs. I think James Cook is the back in this game that has the most yards from scrimmage. So rushing and receiving yards, I think the most of them go to James Cook. I think one of the things about the Jets defense, it's really good. But if there was a weakness to it last year, it was their run defense. It was kind of average. Even the Bills had some level of success running the football, not quite where their season averages were. But I think that they're going to be able to lean on James Cook, the runner, but also I think involving him in the passing game is going to be important in this football game. They got some good outside corners in Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. And so I think that kind of puts some of the ancillary components of your passing game more in the spotlight. And I can see the Bills leaning into James Cook a little bit in this game. So I think he has the most yards from scrimmage. I wanted to pick something like with the slots, but I couldn't figure it out. Like with Kincaid, Hardy, Sherfield, I was thinking, well, if I predict them to have a combined 9 receptions, is that interesting? But I thought the better way to kind of communicate what I'm trying to get after was, all right, James Cook has the most yards from scrimmage of any back in this game. Number 4, I'm predicting 150 rushing yards from the Bills in this game. I think they need to lean into running the football. I think there's going to be production throwing the ball. Don't get me wrong. But where I feel like they might have the greatest advantage is running the football. And with James Cook and Damian Harris and Latavius Murray and Josh Allen, I think they can get some yards on the ground. So put me down for 150 rushing yards or more from the Bills on Monday Night Football. And the last one is, I always predict if I think the Bills will win the game. And I do think the Bills win this game. I've mentioned it already. Pressure's on the Jets, but also the Bills catch them at a good time. I think the Jets are going to be a good football team. But week 1, a lot of new pieces, right? A lot of expectations. They got to play from that vantage point. I think that favors the Bills to be able to go to New Jersey and win this game. And I think the Bills are kind of laying low right now. And I like that. I think that this is a really good football team. Is there a path for the Jets to win the game? Of course there is. But I think the Bills win this game. I'm envisioning like a 24-20 game, 24-17, 27-21, something like that, where the Bills kind of get to the mid-20s and the Jets kind of flirt with the 20s. Maybe they get barely into it. But I think the Bills win this football game and remind the world who they are and remind the world that the Jets have a lot to prove. And it could absolutely happen for them. It certainly can. But that's how I think things go on Monday night. All right, folks, looking forward to this football game, and I'm looking forward to recapping this football game. Immediately after the game, I'm going live on Bleacher Report. Then I'm getting to work on Locked On Bills. And then on Tuesday, obviously, I'm going to have episodes of Locked On Bills, but also I'm doing a midday Bleacher Report stream there as well. So make sure you're checking out my work over at Bleacher Report. A couple of live streams coming at you pretty quick here on Monday and Tuesday. Not to mention, we're going to get Herd Mentality in, and we're going to get the All-22 review in. As soon as that tape's available, I'm going to get into it and work on an All-22 review episode for you. So a lot coming your way here, reacting to this Bills game. Hopefully it's our first Victory Tuesday of the year. I want to say it so bad. So let's keep our fingers crossed for that. All right, folks, would love it if you took a second to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the game. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you right after the conclusion of Monday Night Football.